Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss mystical works of literature and how they relate to recovery. We hope you enjoy today's podcast episode.
Hello, this is Buddy C. Welcome to the Tao of Understanding Recovery Podcast. Today we have Brian and Drew. Good to have you guys. In this podcast, we talk about how Taoist literature, which I knew nothing about at all growing up, relates to our 12-step recovery. Some of us find that this really speaks to the higher power, how we process a God of our understanding, be it that God is something separate from us, the traditional Christian or Islamic God in the sky kind of thing, or if we look at it as love, or if we look at it as maybe being this present moment. Similar to what God described himself to Moses as being in the Old Testament. I am that I am. Regardless, we don't talk about perceptions of God much, which is never a good topic. We talk about how this applies to our program, and the program's really about learning how to let go and surrender in more and more of our lives. If we practice the 12 steps and we're looking at step 3, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand him. If that's the case, then Taoist thought is very applicable. So we usually read a text and talk about the text. Today we're doing the inverse. We're going through the steps, taking each step, and then talking about how Tao thought relates to the step. Today we're on step 5, but the first thing we do is talk a little bit about how we work step 5 and how our sponsor worked it with us and how we work it with sponsees. Then we'll talk about some different Taoist texts and see how that applies. Talk about 2 things first before we get to step 5. One, a resource that we have. And the resource I want to mention today is our Google Calendars that we have under resources at buddyc.org. These are 2 calendars I built for my own use. One is a thought for the day, which could be a Tao thought, a Bible, Course in Miracles, a quote from someone in the program, all in a single per day thought, which you could add this calendar to your Google Calendars. The second one I have in there is a Course in Miracles calendar, which I also built for myself. When I was starting to look at Course in Miracles, they're broken down into daily lessons. So I built a calendar that would give me that lesson every day. So I wouldn't have to look anywhere else. I could just look at my Google Calendars and there it is. I'd like to say I did that to give away, but I didn't. I had a difficult time finding a calendar for me, so I built it for me. And I said, maybe I should share this. So that's where that came from too. And I am in the process of redoing the thoughts. I'm updating that this year, hopefully into somewhat of a final kind of calendar. Going to include some I am statements there too. Second thing, we talk about a synchronistic moment. We find in the Tao that life is lining up. It amazes me if I talk to someone and they say they never see that happening for them. That's so foreign to me because I see it happening all the time. If not on a daily, at least on a weekly basis. I hope it's happening for them too, and they just don't see it. I've mentioned before, Mr. Magoo my way through life, and hopefully they're Mr. Magooing their way through too. Drew has our synchronistic moment.
Yeah, I do. I didn't attend last week's Tao of Our Understanding meeting because I was at a meditation retreat for 4 days. It was great. Really glad I went. But I was a little disappointed that I had to miss this meeting. And then I also do an in-person meeting on Sunday mornings in my neighborhood. It's a Recovery Dharma meeting. If you don't know, Recovery Dharma is basically like a 12-step program, except Buddhist based. I really enjoy it. Coincidental that the AA is 12 steps, and then Buddhism has the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And hey, that adds up to 12. That's a nice coincidence. But the Recovery Dharma community in our city, we have millions of people in our city, but the community is really small. There are maybe 5 to 10 people who come to my meeting on Sunday morning. I was a little disappointed I missed it. Sunday, I was coming back home from the meditation retreat. A woman who lives in my city came up to me. I've met her once months ago. She asked if I could give her a ride back to Dallas because her ride fell through. And I said, yeah, sure. I was looking forward to driving home by myself, but I was happy to give her a ride. So we went out to my car, and I had a Recovery Dharma book on my front seat. We opened the doors, and I picked it up and moved it to the back seat. And she said, oh, which Recovery Dharma meeting do you go to? I said, Sunday morning. Have you heard of it? She said, yeah, I go to the one on Monday. In our city of millions of people, she's one of just a handful who go to these meetings. I've never been to her meeting. She's never been to mine. But we had a really good discussion about it for quite a while. Not only the meetings, but our backgrounds and history of addiction and what we found that helps and what we found that doesn't. And that discussion would not have happened if I hadn't just had that book sitting on my front seat, and if I hadn't been willing to drive a few hours with somebody who I really didn't know. A very nice little synchronistic moment, saying yes to helping somebody and accidentally leaving a book out, and that leads to really good, meaningful conversation.
Thank you, Drew. I don't know if I'll ever understand why things like that line up. I honestly don't remember things of that nature lining up in the past. No matter how much of a stupor I was in, I could notice something like that. Maybe my self-will kept me out of those moments that would benefit others or myself, because I wasn't willing to be of service, because life was all about me. I think that's probably got something to do with it. But thank you. It's great when we can be in a place that those things happen. Okay, step 5. What seems to be the way we're talking about this. I'll read the step. Let's talk a little bit about how we work the step, and then let's talk about some Tao quotes that may be applicable. I know with some of these steps, we may not have direct quotes that say, there it is. So I don't want to stretch something to make it say something it doesn't. But let's just see what happens. Step 5, admitting to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. I do have a question for you, Drew. I didn't know you went to a Dharma meeting. How do you guys address God in a Dharma meeting? Because it's not typical. Some Buddhist sects believe in a God, but a lot of Buddhist sects do not, as an entity separate.
It doesn't come up. It's if somebody brings it up, it's just on their own when they're sharing. There are people with Christian backgrounds who come in. The Recovery Dharma program, the Buddhism that's used is like just the real secular part of Buddhism, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path. When you read those texts, there's no belief in God required for any of it. There's nothing supernatural. It's just all about using your speech wisely, using your actions wisely, having right intentions, using mindfulness, using concentration, being aware that 99% of our suffering is created by our desires, by our aversions, by our getting in our own way. It's really just taking the philosophical part of Buddhist teachings and applying those to our lives.
Everyone brings their own interpretation of God with them, just like in AA.
Yeah, and there are several people who come in because they were turned off by all the higher power talk, the God talk in the AA meetings that they went to. Were in the Bible Belt. The AA meetings can get more explicitly Christian God based, and that can turn some people off, and they like coming to Recovery Dharma because that's not an element of this program.
Thank you, Drew. Part of admitting to God, I would wondered how in that 12-step approach, what is admitting to God? That's one of the things we see in the fifth step is we're admitting to God, to ourselves, and another human being. How would they approach that? Have you ever heard anyone talk about that in your meeting, or do you have any thought on that?
It does come up when people talk about how they and me, we talk about how once we got sober, we realized all of the hurt that our actions caused people. And we apologized to the people who we wronged and apologize to ourselves and try to forgive ourselves, try to make amends any way we can. We just apologize to the people who we did wrong to and leave out if anybody does apologize to a higher power or admit their wrongdoings to a higher power, that's something they do. But it's more of being responsible to the people who you affected and yourself.
Thank you, Drew. I can see some ways you could approach that if you do not believe in a traditional God as, let's say, quote, Christian God. If God is love, which I don't think would be offensive to Buddhists, I think that could fall under Buddhist teaching. If what we think of as God is actually love, admitting to love would be me asking how love can change this wrong, this nature of my wrong, or this character defect. For example, I always go back to the same one, praying for the person that you resent. That's getting love involved in the situation, or asking, how can I be helpful? Now, praying for them. I had a discussion with my Zen teacher the other day about this. He surprised me, actually. We've always talked about there being something. All the Zen books we read, which is a form of Buddhism, talk about there's something. We don't know what it is, but we sense there's something in every book. Some they actually name it God, but there's something. We were talking about making an amend. I said, I don't think when I pray, if I had a resentment against Brian, if I prayed for Brian like we learned in the resentment prayer, asking the will of God for them, good things for them, the things I would want, and then we can do more and more with that. Do I think Brian's life changes? No, I don't. But it changes me. That's been my approach. Surprisingly, out of his mouth came, I wouldn't be so sure of that. I'm like, what? He says, I just recently had an experience that I think there may be something to that. I'm like, okay. He's the last person in the world I would have thought would have came back with that response, because I've seen him laugh in meetings before at people who mentioned that there was a God outside, which I didn't go for, and I let him know that. But still, I was like, really? And our ideas of the higher power keep changing, keep evolving. But I guess, Drew, I've mentioned this before. Is it the Metta Sutta that is a Buddhist approach to prayer? May you be safe, happy, and peaceful. May all beings be safe and protected from inner and outer harm. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from ill will, affliction, or anxiety. There's a lot of different translations of that. May you be at peace. May you be healthy. May you be strong and confident. May all beings be well, loving, and peaceful. There's a lot of different translations of that, but is that not a prayer? You're opening yourself up and more or less wanting that for them. And I have even found verbalizing the words of want that it starts changing me. If it does something for them, great. If it doesn't, great too, because it does something for me. Let's talk about the different aspects of the fifth step for a moment. What is the nature of our wrongs? It says that this is what we're admitting. Notice this is just an admission. This is not change. Just like in the first step, we admitted we were powerless, that our lives were unmanageable. Here, we're just admitting. Now, when I made the admission, things started lifting, but the work I did was admitting. That was the work. The exact nature of our wrongs. I've heard that explained as I don't list the times that I stole here. That will come later. I listed I was a thief. The nature of our wrongs, not a sin list. We're painting the picture. It's the way I've heard. Like I said, this is the second admission. In this honesty, we find relief. Integrity is the principle. A lot of us find it easier to admit to God first, so that's why God's first. We admit to ourselves. I think I mentioned this last week. I think the writing of the fourth step for me was the start of the admission to myself. And that could be seen as an admission to God as well, I would think. I think those get murky as we go through it a little bit. They get convoluted a little, which is fine. I think the admission to God continues in 6 and 7 when I'm applying love and compassion to the things I find out of my fourth step. When I'm shining light on those things, taking different actions to another human being, that's honesty. This is from the 12 and 12, page 61. We shall want to speak with someone who is experienced. Didn't say one who knows a lot, but one who is experienced, one who's done this before, who not only has stayed dry, but has been able to surmount other serious difficulties perhaps like our own. This person may turn out to be one's sponsor, but not necessarily so. If you have developed a high confidence in him and his temperament and problems are close to your own, then such a choice will be good. Besides, your sponsor already has the advantage of knowing something about your case. If I'm sponsoring someone who has some legal issues, some things that the statute of limitations may not have run out, I suggest they hire an attorney and tell the attorney their fifth step, those things. I know attorneys in the program that will do that. Have them pay them $1, so they're under retainer, and tell them those things because an attorney's bound not to share those things. But I wouldn't want to take that risk if it were me. I would want to tell the things I could, though, to someone who's been there, someone who's worked a program, because the whole point of sharing this is to find solutions. If you're talking to a priest or talking to an attorney that's not in the program, I say maybe one in the program may help you with some tools, but the more you could tell to someone who, like a sponsor, the better. Oh, there's texts in the big book that talk about this is the first time that some of us feel the presence of God. There's a step 5 promise, page 75 in the big book. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we're delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. And as a sponsor, I want to help also with identifying for the sponsee when we start writing these things down, going through 6 and 7, what the payoff is for holding on to these things. Why would you not share them? Because in 5, you're discovering that there's forgiveness for others and forgiveness for ourselves. Then we rid our terrible sense of isolation and loneliness. And at the end of the step, to relieve our guilt and reduce our shame. Once the fifth step's over, we lose our guilt and shame about our past. We're free. There's some relief there for me, but the real relief came when I applied 6 and 7 to the step. We've talked about a solution for every entry, different solutions for different entries. As a sponsor, this is something I learned the hard way. Put on your game face. The guys that you think would have nothing to shock you the most. Or that's been my experience. I remember the first time it happened, and I don't think he caught it, but I was like, oh my God, is that really what he did? And of course, I didn't say that because that wouldn't have helped him. I just said, is that all you got? I've heard a lot worse than that. That was the worst I'd ever heard up to that point. But it didn't matter. And he got relief and he's sober today. Yeah, put on that game face and be ready to share some of your past. You don't have to share it all. Sharing one or two things that would make him feel, him or it'd be her, of course, for women. So I'm just saying him because that's who I sponsor. Because the whole point is not to make me feel comfortable. The point is to make him feel comfortable. And no matter how, whatever the thing is, there's always a way out. Drew?
Yeah, looking at the Tao Te Ching, how it applies to step 5, you mentioned forgiveness and humility, and those seem to be, you can't really do step 5 until you admit that you might need some humility. Verse 61, part of it really speaks to that, I think. It says humility means trusting the Tao, thus never needing to be defensive. I don't think you can really do step 5 while in a defensive mode. I did this, but let me tell you why. Let me explain to you why I did it. It's not my fault. Yes, I did this, but I was in the right. That doesn't seem to be a helpful attitude. It goes on and says, a great nation is like a great man. When he makes a mistake, he realizes it. Having realized it, he admits it. Having admitted it, he corrects it. He considers those who point out his faults as his most benevolent teachers. And then I also think at the end of 62.
Hold on a second. You stopped just before the sentence that I really like there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. After he says he considers those who point out his faults as his most benevolent teachers, he thinks of his enemy as the shadow that he himself casts. I love that line because what we realize is if we're disturbed, what's the ACIM? There's something, says something wrong with me, but it means that in a good way. I'm the only person I can surrender. I can't surrender you. So if you were my problem, there could be no solution, really. So that's a good thing that it's me that has the issue if I'm disturbed.
Yeah, and I like that metaphor also for the purpose of if I do see an enemy or if I see somebody who I just really don't like, I don't like their behavior. A lot of times the behavior, the actions that I don't like in someone else is really the behavior and actions in myself that I don't like. I see them doing it and it reminds me of the shame or guilt or embarrassment I feel when I do it. It's my shadow, me casting my shadow on them.
Yeah, I had a situation in the last couple of weeks. It was a business situation where someone didn't do what they were supposed to do. So they were deflecting as if I had not done what I was supposed to do. In the past, I would have had no control whatsoever. I would have been just flaying right into this guy. I said, what's the point? This is a one-off encounter. There's no reason. I said, no, I'm not going to do it. And if I would have fed that and kept that, it would have kept on and been back and forth. All that stuff would have started.
So you considered the person who pointed out your faults as your most benevolent teacher.
I did. I didn't tell him thank you. I wanted to say thank you, MF. But I didn't even do that.
Bless your heart.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was something I was supposed to get an email about, something I registered for. And he sent an email to the person who was supposed to send it, and all caps resend. It's all me. I never got it to begin with. One of those things where they dropped the ball, but yet they wanted it to look as if they didn't thing. Anyway, I wouldn't give myself an A on that. If I gave myself an A, it wouldn't have even been an issue. C plus though. I'll go C plus on that one. But
Bless them, change me. Had a situation this week, email, and I wanted to send them screenshots and just burn them down, but I didn't even reply.
That's so much better than what it used to be. I'd have spent all afternoon on this guy.
Yeah.
Maybe the next day too. I don't know.
Yeah. I had to let the temperature come down.
Drew, did you have something with 62? You said?
Yeah, the very end of it, the last little stanza. Why did the ancient masters esteem the Tao? Because being one with the Tao, when you seek, you find. And when you make a mistake, you are forgiven. That is why everybody loves it. So I think that directly ties in. Admitting your mistake, you are forgiven. You don't need to do anything else. Forgiveness is just granted to you by the Tao. And I think that helps you grant forgiveness to yourself and helps you be okay with if the people who you harmed don't forgive you. There's no requirement that somebody that you harmed forgive you. Begging for their forgiveness puts pressure on them. That's a demand you're making on somebody else, and that's not healthy. So if you know that you are forgiven by the Tao, and if you can forgive yourself, then I think that helps me be more at peace with whatever the outcome is.
Just like the Lord's Prayer says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. We forgive and we're forgiven in the same way that we forgive. I think that reciprocity is there for forgiving ourself in the fourth step. When we start working through and applying 6 and 7, for me, I don't think it's that I learn to love myself, then I can love others. It's I make the decision to love others regardless of how I feel about myself. And then my opinion about myself starts to change. That's just been my experience. These quotes we're using today is from Stephen Mitchell's translation of the Tao Te Ching. Let's look at verse 46. When a country is in harmony with the Tao, the factories make trucks and tractors. When a country goes counter to the Tao, warheads are stockpiled outside the cities. There's no greater illusion than fear, no greater wrong than preparing to defend yourself, no greater misfortune than having an enemy. Whoever can see through all fear will always be safe. That's what this process is about, allowing us to see through our fear. When fear's controlling our lives, we're building weapons. We're hedging against regrets from the past and worries of the future, justifying our behavior. When those fears are surrendered, then we're creating and being of value. Then I have a once a quote and a Chawansa quote. My once a quote is, if people do not hide their faults, then faults will disappear. Then my Chawansa quote is, the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their right name. Part of calling something by its right name, for me, would be being honest with what is really going on, not rationalizing my wrongs, justifying, defending, but seeing them more clearly. And that's what 4 and 5 and through 9 are about. You guys have any other quotes? I do want to talk about something that's I rarely hear mentioned about the fifth step. My sponsor didn't mention it. Actually, I don't think either sponsor I worked through the steps with mentioned doing this. We read the promises earlier, which are on 75, and just below that, returning home after we've completed our fifth step, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. carefully reviewing what we've done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. If we did not see God that way, we could just say what we're grateful for, that we're grateful for these things. I'm grateful for the relief that I'm feeling. Just say it out to the air. I could use that in any application, just as I would have in the past used a prayer. Taking this book down from our shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps, carefully reading the first 5 proposals, first 5 steps. We read them again. We ask if we have omitted anything, for we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man. So we're building the arch. We haven't built it completely, but we're building it, that we'll walk through as a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? If we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. So in other words, I just sit for an hour. You could use that as meditation time. Maybe get any notes you have from where you've worked the steps up to this point. Just sit with it. Say, have I forgot anything? Is there anything here I need to see? And just have a legal pad at least, something you can jot some notes on, and just sit and be open and see what happens. And if anything else bubbles up that you need to deal with, go deal with it with your sponsor. Come back and do this process again until there's nothing that bubbles up. Drew?
The end of chapter 42 really speaks to that. It says, ordinary men hate solitude, but the master makes use of it, embracing his aloneness, realizing he is one with the whole universe. That's what you're doing in your hour of solitude.
Yes, thank you. Were y'all instructed when you worked the steps to do that? I was not. All my past ones, I didn't suggest they do that. I didn't even know that was there. For whatever reason, I was not aware of it. That sounds like a good practice to me.
Buddy, what page was that on again?
75.
75.
75 has 3 things there. 3 things I have marked. We're talking about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The first paragraph is how we do our 5th step. The second paragraph are the 5th step promises. And the third paragraph is what we do after we've completed our 5th step.
I like that part. We're building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last.
Yep. And remember, this is just an admission, but that can be so difficult just to admit.
Only sick as our secrets.
I like that phrase, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
It's like the first step. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. That was our first admission. Now we have another. Well, guys, anything else before we close? I think we had a good conversation on the 5th step. We'll get into my favorites the next couple of weeks, 6 and 7. That's where I see the real change starting to happen, where we elevate all of this up to a higher level. Get that light disinfectant on it, Drew. All right, guys, if there's nothing else, y'all have a great week. Hope to see you next week. Thank you. Hello, this is Buddy C. I wanted to make you aware of several recovery-related resources that I've posted in the episode description. These resources include a list of recovery podcasts, a free sober meditation app, daily recovery email, shared Google recovery calendars. Hope you put some of these resources to use and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends in recovery.